Yeah, now I hear myself. I'm not Mr. Margulis. I'm Robert Roos. I'm the chief curator of Kunstalkade in Amersfoort. We just opened yesterday an exhibition of the photographs of Mr. Margulis, the collector from Miami, who will now give a talk about his collection and everything that's connected to it. Mr. Margulis.
Pleasure to be here. I enjoyed the fair very much. It's a very exciting fair, and it's very good for young people to get into collecting. So I'll give you a few ideas about what I'm doing in Miami. I guess I signal when I'm ready to change the slide, so we can start. Okay, the photography is located in a warehouse in a section called Wynwood in Miami. And it's a converted warehouse which was originally manufacturing dresses, and then part of it was manufacturing aluminum materials. And anyway, I couldn't put the photos in my house, and it became too large, and I decided to acquire these warehouses. We are open to the public. We charge $10 for adults, $0 for children. We look at this as an educational institution. We get a lot of college kids, and we get high school, and the money all goes to a homeless shelter for women and children. This is one of the shows we had, Bill Tucker, Noguchi. Next slide, please. That's Donald Judd. This gives you the scope of the facility that we have. It's approximately 45,000 square feet. Next, please. Anthony Gormley, Michael Heiser. These rocks weigh 10,000 pounds each. They're volcanic rocks. I acquired that work in 1980, and I had no place to really put it. The far rock, we had to cut a hole in the floor to place it. So it has become a permanent installation. Okay, next. Okay, this is now the start of the photo collection. This is an example of some of the photos we have, and the way we hang them. As you can see, the Bechers and Thomas Struth, the German photographers like Struth, Ruf, Gursky. And now I'm going to talk about the individual pieces I have. A short talk like this doesn't really cover it, but I'll try my best and discuss some of the historical aspects of what we're doing. It's very important for us to have a historical lineage of the work, so we can teach these children why something is important. They may look at something, and if they know something about it, it helps them see it better. So, next, please. This is probably the earliest photos we have by Louis Hine, H-I-N-E, an American photographer. He was employed by Congress of the United States to go around to different states and take photos of children, underage children, who were being exploited by factories. And eventually they passed child labor laws against employing young children. They were paying them like 15 cents a day to come in. And Hine went to every single state in the Union. And while these photos are pretty aged, it's over 100 years old, in the back is an explanation of every state he went to and what he felt were the ages of the children. They wouldn't let him into the factories, so he measured the children by the buttons on his coat. Next, please. This is Thomas Ruf, and you can see that, I'm sorry, this is Albert Renge-Pasch. Again, I'm sure you're all familiar with the Bauhaus, which was an experimental type of facility of what I call a think tank. They wanted to merge art and craft, like fabrics, theater sets, photography. And Renge-Pasch did not believe in the Bauhaus. He didn't believe in experimentation. So he essentially became what was called the new objectivist. And he would take very objective photos. You could see how sterile it is. Next, please. One of the group of people that did not believe in experimentation was a German photographer named Wilhelm MaNtz, M-A-N-T-Z. Why did he take these eggs? The reason a lot of those photographers at that time took eggs was because of the shadow effect that the eggs gave from the different voids in the photo. Okay, next. There was another a photographer named Hugo Schmaltz, another German, and he essentially is part of that group. You notice how objective these photos are. They have no personality, they have no function, in effect, other than to say we do not believe in emotion, we do not believe in showing a personality. We just believe in the object. So a lot of times you'll see Rengapashe with just straight trees. The trees have no curvature. They're very objective. Okay, next please. Peter Keetman, 1950s, another German who goes by the movement called photo form. They weren't quite as objective. And next please. This is a Bauhaus photo. The Bauhaus was approximately 1915 to 1925, 28, and then eventually it disbanded. They had photographers who took photos for the very purpose of documenting theater performances and other advertisements. So the Bauhaus did not have a photo teaching department until later on in their life. And then they had a photographer named Walter Peter Hans, who taught photography, and it became a very important element of their teachings. Peter Hans, we were fortunate in getting a work of his, which we show as only a historical reference, as opposed to a very good photograph. We thought he was a great technician, but he didn't have a great vocabulary of photography. And this is a Bauhaus photo, experimentation, like photo montage, photo collage. Those are the kind of works. The Bauhaus was founded by Gropius and Mahalanaj. Go ahead. Next. Okay, parallel to the Bauhaus was a Russian school called Vudemos. And that school was at the same time as the Still in Holland and the Bauhaus. Vudemos was a school with no money. The state supported them to a degree, and then they just abandoned the school. This particular work is a model from a student who did this, is his interpretation of perhaps building a building someday of this. As you can see with the curvature, you can see the whole theory of Russian constructivism, how this is constructed. If any of you have seen Bilbao, if any of you have seen the Guggenheim, you can see the tremendous influence that the Russian constructivists had on Frank Gehry and even Frank Lloyd Wright, who did the Guggenheim. So this Vudemos, again, had fabrics, theater sets. It was found by Rodchenko and his wife Stepanova, who was a performer. We don't know who did this model. The works in the collection are approximately 30 of these, and we do not know who the photographers are. Could have been Rodchenko, could have been Totlin, could have been any one of these Russian, but more likely it was probably a student taking another photo of a student's model. Next, please. Another Vudemos model. These are very intriguing photos because, for me, they opened up a whole new way of seeing things, the direction. And you must realize that between Russian constructivism and Italian futurism, those are the most heavily influential movements in today's architecture. Next, please. Okay, strictly American, Walker Evans, a photographer who made something out of nothing, but gave these people dignity, gave these people, it was something very regal about their dealing with poverty, dealing with the human condition. And so Evans was one of the foremost influences of American photography. Later in his life, he could not set up a tripod because he became too frail. So he did a series of Polaroids, color Polaroids, and he did approximately 1,700 of these until eventually he passed on. He was part of the Farm Security Administration, FSA, they call them. Next. Dorothea Lang, she was part of that group. She was one of the few photographers in the FSA that developed her own pictures. She wouldn't let anyone do that. The show at Amersfoort has a very famous photo of her. It's called The Migrant Mother, when she drove down a highway and she saw this woman sitting in a tent with a child and several other children around her. And she went and photographed that woman. She asked permission, and it became one of the icons of American photography. Next. Helen Levitt, a street photographer, used to work with Walker Evans, used to use his camera, went in the subways and took pictures of people sitting opposite them, and they didn't know the pictures were being taken. So Walker Evans and Helen, they became known in a series as the subway pictures. And they hid the camera under their coat, and they opened their coat when the people weren't looking, and they had an angle lens. So they were looking straight ahead, and they took a picture over here. And these became known as the subway pictures. As far as Walker Evans pictures of these subways, it's pretty rare to get those. Next, please. Okay, you have Robert Adams, a photographer who understood that when the United States had finished World War II, the veterans came back and they essentially defiled the landscape. They had to go with homes to house people, and they went out into the areas of pristine mountains and way out in the suburbs, so to speak, and it became the suburbs. So Adams said, we don't like the idea of neon lighting, motels, billboards, gas stations, but it's necessary. Otherwise, we can't house people. You can't house people in the middle of a city, otherwise it might be too expensive. So you have these tract housing, and he was the opposite, and I'm sure you're familiar with Ansel Adams, the great landscape photographer who did these romantic and nostalgic mountains where the airplanes fly over them and the people take their canoes and they see these grand mountains. They call him the Paul Bunyan of landscaped architecture. And so Robert Adams was just the opposite. He did what is called the new topography. That was a movement that was started where they said, we want the photos to be so impersonal and so empty and so bland that it didn't even define who the author of the photo was. And that's why they call them the new topographers, because when you see a map, you do not think, who did the map? It's authorless. And that's what Adams really wanted to do. And there's a group of these artists that were called the new topographers, such as Louis Baltz, Ed Ruscha, Frank Golke, and of course, Robert Adams. Next, please. The Bechers. I'm sure you're all familiar with the Bechers. When I showed these photos earlier of Rengapach, Schmaltz, the most important influence of the Bechers was Rengapach and August Sander. And those particular figures became the influence of Becher. Bechers organized the School of Dusseldorf, and his students were Thomas Struth, Thomas Roof, and Gursky. So the Bechers, they started this school by taking photos of very, very mundane, impersonal structures, which are probably now historical. No one builds these anymore. Water towers, blast furnaces, row houses. And the skies are always monotone. They're always gray. They have absolutely no personality. And the Bechers usually sell these in terms of what is called, there's a word for it. They have these, you know what, Bill? Typology. I have my, my coach here. And these typologies were in multiples of 3s or 6s or 9s or 12s or 15. So if you wanted to commission one, you would choose 2 photos and they would take the rest. So if you had a 15 photo typology, they would choose 13. You would pick 2. And it took months and months to get them. They were pretty busy. So that was the Bechers. And I don't know if they still have the school, but their students became more famous than them in a way. As Gursky, of course, is very, very sought after, as well as Thomas Roof and Struth. Next, please. This is the first photo I bought in Chicago about 11, 12, 13 years ago. I wasn't collecting photography then. And I looked at her and she looked at me. And she kept staring at me. And I said, why not? Take a chance. Because the scale of it is such that it fit very well into my private collection of paintings. It had the presence and the scale to do that. So if you look at her, it's about 6 feet tall, the photo. And you see every blemish in her face. And she's still staring. And what's interesting is it goes back to the objectivity of Rengapasche, of all these other early German photographers. And Thomas Roof was the first one of the young contemporary German artists that did large-scale photographs. So if you can think and imagine, this is like a driver's license photo or a passport photo. It is objective. It is not really a person, it's an object. And that's what the theory was behind Roof. Next, please. One of his good buddies is Thomas Struth, and this is called the Pergamon, which is located in Berlin, the museum. Struth did a series of photos where he became a voyeur, and he always took an architectural remnant of a building, and he wanted people in the photo who didn't know they were being photographed, and that's why they called him sort of with a voyeur type of mentality. He did a series. This is not from that series, but he did a series of museums from all over the world. Okay, next. This photo is at Akhi in the show. This is by Olafur Eliasson, Scandinavian artist. Originally started out doing photos and groupings like this, rock formations in the ocean. Just a tremendous artist who has had, at a young age, a show at the Museum of Modern Art and PS1 all over the world. And Olafur doesn't take pictures anymore. He does installation work. He does big environmental work. It's about the environment with him. It's about light. It's about sun, moon. We have an installation at the warehouse with no ceiling. It's between 2 buildings. And when it rains, the rain comes in, the sun comes in, you hear the traffic on the highway adjacent to us. So it's about hearing, sight, sound, smell, all senses. Next, please. Another photographer who we're very fond of in the collection is an artist named Polo Ventura. There is such a thing as constructed photography. Paolo builds this. He builds the buildings, he builds the figures, and then he takes photos of what he has built. So in a sense, he's not just a photographer, he's a sculptor as well. And he works on these sets, and we think he's real terrific. We just have a series from Venice, very, very wonderful, nostalgic, as people are looking over the canal in the lonely type of atmosphere. Next, please. This is Barbara Probst, P-R-O-B-S-T, young photographer. This is the same. This is the same shot of a photograph, taken the exact same moment, but the cameras are placed in 4 different places. And with a time clock, she synchronizes everything, and this is all the same scene. So the camera clicks off, and it's in, as I say, 4 different places. And it's sort of a little disorienting because you're trying to figure out how can this be the same when it's all different angles. So we think that's a nice, creative way of expressing photography. Next. A very popular photographer from South Africa is Peter Hugo. And Peter has done work with hyenas, Africans who have hyenas as pets, and baboons, and speaks for itself. It's a little disorienting in one way. Next, please. Okay, this is a new photographer that I felt very strongly about, another African named Sabelo Manji. We got a whole series of these, and it reminds me very much of the new topographer of the old German photographers. There's a lot of emptiness in this, what I call existential emptiness. And yet, it's the everydayness of life. Next, please. This is also Sabelo. Many of his photos are devoid of people. But what's important when they're devoid of people is not what the photograph is, but what the photograph is about. And so when you see an empty storefront or an empty street, you're thinking of people that were in that storefront and have lost their business perhaps, gave it up, and you wonder what's coming next. That was the genesis of Cristo when he did the storefronts back in the early 60s. Next, please. This is from Liberia, a photographer named Tim Hetherington. I saw his work in a magazine. He was a photojournalist who went to war-torn areas all over the world and took photos, and was nominated for an Academy Award, a movie called Restrepo, which was a documentary. I called him up and I asked him if he'd be interested in selling me some work. I liked his work very much. And he said, by all means, I could use the money. And I bought some photos of his from Liberia. This is one of the photos from Liberia. Picked up, and I had a nice conversation with him, and I said, if you're ever down in Miami, please call me. I'd love to meet you, and we have room for you to stay with us, and so forth. And I picked up the paper one day, and he was killed in Libya. And so these particular type of people that do these war photos are at risk every minute, and yet they can't his partner spoke at in Miami and said, no matter how dangerous it is, we're hooked into this. We can't help ourselves. It's like an addiction. And we have families, and we leave our families because our other family is the men out there taking these pictures and the soldiers. Next, oh, you got it. You got that. Okay. This was a work I saw, another African named Giorgio Moroder. This is one of 250 slides that we have in the collection. And it's all about the war-torn area of Nigeria, which is 3 types of aspects to that country. One is violence, one is oil, and the other is poverty. And so all these 250 slides that we have and show, they go off every 4 or 5 seconds. And people that come to the warehouse are very much transfixed with seeing this. Next, please. This is a recent acquisition. The name is Watosh, Egyptian. I was fascinated by this work. These are puppets. There's a series of 8 of them, and I just felt they were very dramatic. And the photographer does a lot of videos and theater sets, and so I was able to acquire these. Next. And I got a time series here, so this is the last one. This is a video of one of the most famous events to happen in the United States, the O.J. Simpson trial. This is done by an artist named Kota Izawa, and it's been very, very popular at the warehouse. You keep looking at it, and you still can't believe he was innocent. And so I'm sure you're all familiar with that O.J. Simpson situation. This is the last 3 minutes of the trial when they announced the verdict. And you have O.J. and Johnny Cochran, and that's Frederick Goldman, whose son was killed along with Nicole Simpson. And this is complete animation, and the judge's voice, the jury, are real. So for those 3 minutes, people are very much involved in it. And the collection has a good number of videos, and we show them because the children really like that. When the kids come in, they respond well to videos, and sometimes they don't respond as well to black and white photos. But we try and nurture their education a little bit, and we think we've been pretty successful. During the week of Basel, we get an attendance of approximately 5,000 people, and then the rest of the weeks when we're open, we could get from 50 to 100 people. That's it. We're open 6-7 months a year. We're closed during the summer, and every summer we replenish and redo our warehouse with different works. We do not borrow works from anyone. It's all from the collection. We do not give works, we do not rent out the facility to anyone, no matter what the price is, unless during Art Basel, where somebody might come in and give us a high price to have a dinner there, and at that point we give all that money to the homeless shelter. We also give certain charities the right to come in and have their function. So I think I'm on a time limit, and if you have any questions for a few minutes, I'll be glad to answer them.